Hey, it's time to talk Atlanta Falcons football on the Our Football Network. And that means, that's right, it's Kevin Knight from the Falcoholic. You can catch him at, it's Falcoholic Kevin. I don't want to get that wrong. Kevin Falcoholic. I don't think actually, if you say Kevin Falcoholic, people might get the wrong idea. But yeah, Kevin's done a great job covering the Atlanta Falcons here for us on the Our Football Network for many years. And I'm going to be putting together the Our draft preview guide soon, and one of the teams that I'm responsible for each year, the Atlanta Falcons. Kevin does a great job of prepping me for that. And Kevin, thanks for doing this again.
Absolutely. Happy to be back.
All right. So this is a pretty big time. We are now only a few days away, actually, 6 days, actually a week away from officially free agency kicking off. And the last time we spoke, there was a lot of, and not surprisingly, a lot of talk about what the Falcons were thinking of doing at the quarterback position. And Lamar Jackson's name came up quite a bit. Seems to be at this point, now that he's been tagged, and from what we hear, that's not going to be a possibility for Atlanta. So let's start there. Let's start at the top. What do you think the goal is for the Atlanta Falcons heading into free agency and the draft? Do you think it's going to be find a veteran to team up with Ridder, or do you think it's going to be we're going to go all in on one of those rookie quarterbacks with our first pick?
Yeah, it's really interesting. This regime is very tight-lipped. They don't really leak a lot, like the Lamar Jackson interest or not. We didn't hear a peep until after he was tagged, and then we heard, within minutes that, yeah, they were never actually interested. Everybody else was just making stuff up. So that was sort of interesting, but that's very much on brand for this front office. They don't leak. They have a really tight ship, and that's not surprising for a group that's only been around for a couple years, and there's mostly positive vibes. There's not a lot of disgruntled employees at this point leaking stuff. So, but we've heard basically stuff all over the spectrum with regards to quarterback. Arthur Blank, the owner, came out pretty clearly supporting Desmond Ridder. The coaching staff has been they've been very careful not to say anything like meaningful, I guess. But the owner did make a pretty clear statement that he's supportive of Ridder, that the team has been supportive of him. I do think plan A is to have Ridder start, and I think that they are comfortable with that. But they will add another quarterback. It's not going to be, as much as my Toledo buddy Logan Woodside, as much as I enjoy him, he's not going to be the backup. He might be the third quarterback. They're going to add somebody. Apparently at the Combine, the Falcons made it known that they were doing a lot of work on the quarterbacks. I think that's smart. Like, you want everyone to think you're interested in the quarterbacks.
Yes.
The only reason you wouldn't want people to think you were interested in the quarterbacks is if you actually really were interested in trading up for the quarterbacks. So it doesn't really make me think that they're all that interested, especially at 8. If they were sitting at like 5, then it's like, okay, maybe they'll wait for one to fall, or they'll consider trading up a couple spots with the Cardinals or whatever. But to get from 8 to 3, to take what's likely to be the third quarterback off the board,
so
it's going to be too expensive.
So you believe, and it's early, and see, this is the funny thing, and I'll be talking about the Combine with Dave Syvertson from Our Lads when we do another show on the draft next week. But I'll say it now, and that is that I don't understand why people think it's such a surprise that Anthony Richardson had a great Combine.
It's not.
I mean, that's
I
exactly
wasn't
what
expecting to be that good, but
still, that's Anthony Richardson. That's what he is. Now, can he become a good quarterback in the NFL regarding all the other little things that you've got to be coached up? There's a lot of mechanics. There's a whole bunch of different things that he has got to be better at the next level for him to be considered worthy of a top 10 or top now 5 quarterbacks. So my question is now, and I haven't looked at it, do you believe that because he had such a really good Combine that he is now going to get drafted in the top 5? And like you said, top 3 a month ago, for the past few months, it was all right. It's going to be 1 and 2. Everybody knows 1 and 2. The third quarterback might be Levis, maybe Richardson, somewhere in the top 10, maybe even 15 if they don't do well with the Combine. But do you think it's now definitely, you would definitely side the way of top 3, 1, 2, 3 quarterback with Richardson being 3?
I do think that we're probably going to see 3 go in the top 5. In terms of who takes them or which 3 they are, that is much harder to figure out. I would be surprised if Bryce Young wasn't one of the 3.
Oh, he's got to be.
Yeah,
he still should be number 1. I don't want to hear anything of it.
Come on. It seems like the Texans love Bryce Young more than anybody else. So
okay.
I think that it will be the Texans taking Bryce Young at 2. The Colts and Will Levis just seem like this match. I personally wouldn't do it, but Will Levis just screams Colts quarterback to me. So I'm still on that. Still feeling that.
All right, but what you're saying is you think Levis could be the one that gets drafted ahead of Richardson.
Yeah, and I disagree entirely with that. I would have Levis as the 4th quarterback.
I agree.
So to me, it would be Young number 1, C.J. Stroud 2, just on the back of how just rock solid he is and everything, and then Richardson at 3.
Yeah.
And honestly, if the Falcons were going to take a quarterback, I would want them to take Richardson, given Arthur Smith's scheme, how he prizes the athleticism, how he sort of simplifies the offense really for the quarterback, and he doesn't really ask the quarterback to do a ton with how play action heavy it is. You don't need to be an expert to be able to execute it at a solid level. When he had Ryan Tannehill, you could see that it was elevated. He asked the quarterback to do a lot more, and I think that's what he wants, but it functioned just fine with Mariota. This was a top 10 offense with Mariota for 9 games before Mariota fell off a cliff. So, he doesn't need an elite passer, an elite processor to get things to a good level. So if they were going to go the rookie route, I would want it to be Richardson or maybe Hendon Hooker, like early on day 3.
That makes a lot of sense too.
That out. But I'm not interested in any of the other ones for the Falcons. I mean, I love Bryce Young, but he's not going to make it to 8, and C.J. Stroud not going to make it to 8 either. No. So somebody else is going to get aggressive for quarterbacks and take the rookies before the Falcons would have a chance to. I really don't think that they're that interested in the quarterbacks, especially at 8. I do think they're going to add a veteran. For me, I really like Taylor Heineke as that option where he's just good enough to push Ritter and be a little bit of a threat. You never want your second-year quarterback with 4 games under his belt to just be the unquestioned starter with no one else to even threaten him. I don't think that's really a good situation, but I think Heineke gives you enough of a threat to push Ritter, but not enough of a threat where you're really expecting Heineke to win that battle.
Yes.
And Heineke wouldn't expect to necessarily win it either if he was being honest with himself. We know Heineke's comfortable being a backup. Everyone raves about him in the locker room. He's a good guy. He fits the Arthur Smith offense really well. He's athletic. He's got a big arm. Doesn't always make the best decisions with the football, but as a backup, you could do a lot worse. He's one of the better backups.
Oh, yes. Absolutely. Yes.
So that would be my preference. I don't think he'll be overly expensive either. I know Jacoby Brissett is available too, and he, in a similar way, makes a lot of sense. He's a little bit older, will be more expensive, so I lean a little bit more towards Heineke. But Brissett is better, obviously, and probably more of that spot starter, whereas I think Heineke is more of the high-end backup. So that's the route I do think they go, adding a Heineke, a Brissett.
Okay. And look, we're going to find out. Range. I mean, bottom line is if they go after one of those guys, then that definitely means that they're out. Now, if Richardson were to fall to 8, would that change their mind even if they were to sign one of those veterans?
Sorry, could you repeat that?
That's okay. If Richardson were to fall to 8, even after they signed Heineke or Brissett, let's say, would they then say, well, okay, now he's fallen to us. We have to think about this. Or do you believe even if he were to fall to the Falcons at 8, once they sign that veteran, they're all in on a completely different position?
I don't think they ever go into based on what I know from this group, I don't think they ever go in with a firm rule about what they're going to do. I think that they're pretty flexible. I think that they look at things and they try to go in and say we're going to be their MO seems to be we're going to go into the draft with no expectations, with no massive holes that we have to fill so that we can sit there when we're on the clock and objectively pick the player that we think is the best, in our eyes. And they're going to take into account positional value and all those things too. But they're going to be able to take the guy that they like the best, period. And maybe that guy would be Richardson. I don't know. I think it would be a conversation, certainly.
Okay.
I don't think they would feel pressured to do so because I think they really like Ritter, and if you get Heineke, there's not really a need.
True.
I also think that Richardson's probably going to go in the top 5.
I think you're right.
I could see, weirdly, it seems like maybe Stroud would be the one to fall, which is absurd, but
you never know.
He's the least flashy one.
Yeah, he doesn't have that mobility, and the whole Ohio State thing I think has been a knock. So yeah,
right. You went through this with like Zach Wilson. He was the flashy one, and didn't end up being the best pick. And I feel that way very strongly about Will Levis, and Anthony Richardson to some extent. But like Richardson is so young, and you can tell that like mechanically he's so early that there's an easy path for him to be a drastically better passer. This is not a guy who has good mechanics and still can't hit the broadside of a barn.
Yes.
That's a bigger issue to me than a guy who's like 20 years old.
Yep.
And is clearly still working on his mechanics, but is like a prime Cam Newton, Dante Culpepper level athlete. And he's going to always give you that floor. I mean, you're talking to the guy who was like, yeah, the Falcons could take Malik Willis at 8, so obviously I'm interested in Anthony Richardson, who's a much better prospect than Malik Willis.
Yes.
And, they should consider it. I ultimately don't think that they would do it even if he was there. But I think it should be a consideration always.
And the thing is it makes sense too, because you give Ritter the opportunity if you believe in him. And then next year, there's a lot of other good quarterbacks coming out.
Yeah.
Something happens. You don't think Ritter worked out for you. All right. We gave him the year. He just didn't improve the way we thought he was. All right. We'll go all in next year, and we'll have a bunch of guys to choose from. So
yeah, and I think that's the sad thing about Lamar Jackson right now is that I feel like if this happened in 2024, the Falcons had a full year to evaluate Ritter. They had gotten to spend this money and really improve the roster. We'd have a much clearer picture of how big a deal a quarterback upgrade would make to this team. I think you would feel much more comfortable one way or the other with Lamar Jackson, but it happening this year where you've got this like the roster's not that bad considering, but like very, very cheap roster with a lot of young players, a lot of unproven talent, and a quarterback who started 4 games. A lot of money, obviously, but you don't really know what you have in Ritter. He could be a starter. He could not be. And you've got all this money to spend. This is just not the time, I think, to take that massive swing at quarterback because it's like now we're going to spend all this money on the quarterback, and we maybe just shelved a potential starting quarterback as the backup, which wouldn't be the worst idea in the world considering Lamar's injury history to have a quarterback like Ritter behind him. I think next year is where they go big for a quarterback if Ritter doesn't work out. I think at that point, one way or the other, is Ritter good enough to do this or is he not? And you have hopefully the roster built up enough that you could just add the quarterback in.
Yep.
And be ready to go, as opposed to now, where I still think there's quite a bit of building that needs to happen this year. But it's a really important year. Yeah.
Could we do it all over again with Jackson next year?
Yeah, why not? Right? I mean, do the Ravens extend him, or does he just play on the tag? I mean, who knows? Yeah. Like that whole situation is so crazy at this point. With basically the entire NFL opting out of offering him a contract. I don't know what's going on with that. It's very bizarre, but
sometimes that's what happens when you don't have an agent.
Yeah, he really needs an agent. As much as I'd like to save the money too, at this point, you got to have somebody in there to help you get through this because the entire NFL is basically calling you out for not having an agent and trying to take advantage of you. And you got like when you don't know what you're doing, you got to hire the professionals. I don't know if you've ever seen Gordon Ramsay's Kitchen Nightmares where he goes in to help and it's just complete incompetence for most of these people that start restaurants. Like if you don't know how to run a restaurant, you need to hire someone that's going to help you get your restaurant going. Don't just go in there and expect that it's going to work out because you love food. Lamar Jackson loves football. Doesn't mean he can negotiate a contract. So. That's where I land on it, and hopefully he deserves to get paid.
Sure.
But the entire NFL seems to be coming out very strongly against this fully guaranteed contract, and maybe it seems odd that they do it for Lamar when they didn't do it for like Kirk Cousins, right? But it seems like this is something that the entire NFL is against, is fully guaranteed contracts for quarterbacks. So
Yeah,
I'm interested to see how it develops.
It's kind of and I'm kind of glad though, in a way, because the whole Deshaun Watson contract thing could have really spiraled out of control in the NFL with the salaries for these quarterbacks. So I kind of happy as a fan that we can kind of take a deep breath and say, okay, because you don't want your teams to be crippled with these contracts for one player, and then it just really kills the rest of your roster. So
and there's a wider discussion about how probably all contracts should be guaranteed for injury, and there need to be salary cap ways to maneuver around that, because we can't be hamstringing teams with players that unfortunately have catastrophic injuries and weighing them down. But teams will obviously try to game that too. So there needs to be a very deep look at the salary cap, which is already kind of silly with how teams get around it so easily. I mean, I think you just need to really dig down, come up with better rules, especially around how to handle injured players on the cap, and then just give everyone injury guaranteed contracts, and we don't have to worry about this, because the players deserve the security. This is a brutal game.
Yep.
Players get injured all the time. They deserve the security, and teams deserve to not have their ability to compete robbed from them by guys getting hurt. I mean, it needs to go both ways.
As often as it happens. Yes, in the NFL.
But players deserve to have the security. Teams deserve to have the flexibility to get their rosters.
Hockey does that.
Yeah, it's better for the product on the field too. And I don't know exactly how to implement it, that teams won't take advantage of it. It's probably going to take a while to figure that out in many iterations. But right now, it's not good for either side. So at some point, something's going to have to change there.
All right. Now, we did our first mock draft, and this was like a month ago. So this was like a really early mock draft. And I had the Falcons, and I rolled the dice. Now, I was like, you know what? I could take a corner here. There's a few other positions. But I was like, you know what? You tell me. You're the Falcon fan.
Did you take Bijan?
Yes, I did. I was like, come on, man. Yeah. The dude wants to run the football. So
it would be so fun. It would be really fun.
I mean, I don't know how outlandish that would be. You tell me.
I mean, I don't think it's outlandish, really. I mean, look at what the Falcons have done. They took a tight end at 4, and they took a wide receiver at 8 when they had glaring quarterback and defensive needs both years, and offensive line needs for that matter. So they clearly don't really care about positional value. I mean, they just don't. And maybe that's good. I think they're more concerned with just getting good players. And that's fine. I do think there's a pretty good chance that Bijan is the best player, objectively speaking, at 8. Will be on the board. I think that there are some other guys that you probably lean towards a little bit more that could probably be there, like Paris Johnson Jr. and his absurd 36 and a quarter arms or whatever. That man, I can't believe how big his arms are. His arms are like slightly shorter than DeJuan Jones' arms, who's over 6'8". So that's pretty nuts to me. I think Paris Johnson is one of the blue chip guys that's likely to be there at 8. Christian Gonzalez, the corner.
Yep.
I think he should be a favorite for that pick as well. I guess I'm a little bit lower on some of those edge guys, and a lot of people seem to be like Miles Murphy and Lucas Van Ness. I would consider Tyree Wilson if he was there probably, but I'm not as high on those guys as like Paris Johnson and Christian Gonzalez. But like Christian Gonzalez could definitely be gone.
Could be.
Paris Johnson, do they want an offensive really, it depends, I think, on what happens with McGarry. Like, they did not franchise tag him.
Okay.
To me, that signals they're probably going to let him walk, because he's probably asking for 15 plus a year. And like, McGarry had a great season, one of the best run blockers in the NFL, still a mediocre pass protector. And you can find run blocking tackles. It's not hard. You can't find pass blocking tackles as easily. So I do wonder if they'll let McGarry walk and just draft a tackle, or do they sign another tackle that they like better, like a Jawan Taylor from Jacksonville, who's a much better pass blocker. Sure. Also young. I mean, Caleb McGarry's already 28.
Yeah.
McGarry's 28.
Good point.
People don't know this. Yeah. He was an old rookie, old quote unquote, coming from me, but older rookie, has the short arms. That's always been an issue for him. And has never really been a consistent pass protector. Really, really good run blocker, and also extremely durable. Played every single snap this year. Played most of the snaps last year. I mean, that is valuable. But you look at a Jawan Taylor, elite pass protector, pretty bad run blocker this year, right? But much bigger arms. I think he's got over 34-inch arms, much more prototypical tackle, also a great athlete. And I think the Falcons actually, for once, have a good offensive line coach. It's been a long time, but Dwayne Ledford, every single guard that they had to play like 5 or 6 different guards at left guard last year, and every single one of them looked like they were fine, especially at run blocking. Every single player on the Falcons offensive line became a good run blocker, even if they weren't before. So I think Dwayne Ledford can coach up anyone to be a good run blocker in this scheme. So I'd rather pay the pass protector, who's also 2 years younger, who's more prototypically sized, is not going to have the length issues, than pay McGarry. And maybe people are like, oh, well, it doesn't make sense. You know, McGarry's going to be $18 million. Jawan Taylor's going to be $18 million. Why wouldn't you just keep the guy that's been here? It's because I think Jawan Taylor's the more valuable player. Teaching pass protection, it's hit or miss. Guys sometimes get better. Most of the time they don't. It's one of those things. Run blocking, not that hard to coach up, usually. I mean, in comparison, obviously it's not, that simple no matter what. But
of course,
I feel much more comfortable getting that pass protector, getting the younger player. But also, maybe you just draft a guy at 8, because I think Paris Johnson or Broderick Jones will be there at 8. Both blue chip, offensive tackle prospects. So,
and of course we're going to know that because if they don't, not that they can't sign a guy after the draft. There's usually those veteran 1-year guys that are available after the draft, but you would get the feeling if they don't sign a tackle before the draft that that's going to be a telltale sign of what they might be looking at with that first round pick. Other than that, though, there's really not much else to do on the offensive line, correct?
Yeah, I mean, left guard, it's still sort of up in the air what's going on there, right? I mean, it was like a whole cast of characters last year that it didn't really seem like it mattered. I mean, Elijah Wilkinson was the best and most consistent. He won't be expensive to bring back. Matt Hennessy got a lot of time at guard, and he was looking fine. Chuma Edoga played a game at guard and looked fine before he got hurt. The only one we didn't see last year was Jalen Mayfield, who missed the whole season on IR. Of course, he had a really bad rookie year, but like I said, they've been coaching up everybody, so maybe that wouldn't be as big of a deal. Really, to me, like center is the one spot that I would want to upgrade. I think that Drew Dahlman was like okay, but to me, center play is really important. Dahlman really struggled with blitzes and the protections, and that was his first year as a starter, so that could improve. But I don't think he's a high-end player. I think he's sort of an average starter. So I would definitely consider, getting that
center, left guard type
prospect.
Of player.
Yeah, like I'd love John Michael Schmitz. I would love Joe Tippmann. Those guys are high up my list. I would have loved Cedric Van Pran from Georgia before he went back to school. So that would be one of the things at the top of my list in the second round is potentially a center too.
And these are things that are not where they have to concern themselves with early on.
Yeah, because Drew Dahlman, if you had to start him next year, no big deal.
Yeah.
And the free agent center class is really weak, so I don't think they're going to go out and pay anybody. So maybe you give Dahlman a chance, but maybe you pounce on one of these top centers if they happen to fall to you too.
Yeah, I guess it does depend on what they feel about Dahlman, because like you said, I mean, look, if you draft a guy in the 4th round and he starts the whole year and he plays reasonably okay, then usually he's going to get another chance. Usually, because they're going to try to develop the young guys. That's the game. So but hey, if the right guy falls on their lap, then we could see an upgrade. Okay, so the wide receiver position, we know the tight end situation is set, except for whether they have to bring up, re-sign or add some depth after Pitts. But at wide receiver, we know this is a pretty glaringly weak position depending on what they do with the free agents. Do you think they just bring back what they had on the cheap, maybe draft someone in the middle rounds? Because knowing what Arthur Smith and the offense and how predicated it is with running the football, and that's the game, you've got London, so do you think they feel like they've really invested enough already with Pitts and London? Everything else at the receiver and tight end positions are just going to be kind of role players, and we can live with that? Or do you think, hey, look at the depth chart, that doesn't look good. You got London, and you don't have much else. We have to go out and get ourselves another wide receiver.
Yeah, I think they need to add one more passing game weapon that is a top 3 type of guy. The Falcons are a very interesting passing game. It was very low volume last year. I don't think that's the plan forever. I do think they're going to try to flip it instead of being like 55 run, 45 pass, which is like the highest rate of any team in the NFL of running the football. I think they want it to be more like 55 pass, 45 run. Maybe even 60-40 if the passing game really gets going. So that's part of it, but they love to throw the ball out of 12 and 13 personnel. They love to have those tight ends. Arthur Smith carried 5 tight ends for almost the whole season. I mean, I don't know of any other team that does that. So the Falcons, Parker Hesse and Michael Pruitt, and Pruitt would be one of the guys I would absolutely bring back. He had a really strong season as the tight end too. Caught a bunch of touchdowns, showed chemistry with Ritter, blocked really well. I would definitely go get him. Arthur Smith loves his short tight ends. Him and Parker Hesse are both like under 6'3". So I would get him back. But both Parker Hesse and Michael Pruitt had more snaps played than the third wide receiver. The Falcons don't use 3 wide receivers. They just rarely do it. The wide receiver 2 had more than either of those guys, and that was Olamide Zaccheaus. But I think the wide receiver 2 is still really important for them. Also, just for the depth part of things, like if there's an injury right now to Kyle Pitts or Drake London, which we saw late in the season, it's bad. Like there's nobody. Like London's going to get doubled every snap, and everybody else is not capable of really taking advantage of one-on-one. So they definitely need a wide receiver too. So I could see them signing or trying to sign one of the guys that might be more reasonable, like a Darius Slayton, one of the guys that's not really going to be in the top of the scrum for wide receivers. You probably want to avoid those type. Like Jacoby Myers, I would love, but he's going to get 18 plus because of how weak this class is. Alan Lazard is going to get 18 plus. So I would go for maybe one of those 8 to 10 million guys like a Darius Slayton, who I think would be a great fit here, and then draft somebody, like you said, maybe late day 2, early day 3. I would still bring back Olamide Zaccheaus. I would still bring back Kadero Hodge as a special teamer. And I think you're pretty comfortable with that group.
Okay.
And bring, Jared Bernhardt, their training camp standout last year, who can be maybe your slot guy going forward. They don't use the slot that much, so I think it's a spot where you're really trying to find a diamond in the rough and develop him. So that they do definitely need a wide receiver too, and I think that they're probably going to draft someone as well. I just don't know how early, how much they're going to spend, but it is a need, and not just for we need more threats, but like we need somebody else to be a threat if somebody gets hurt, which will happen throughout the course of a season. So the whole passing game can't fall apart if Pitts or London miss a few games. That's not a way to be a contender. So they got to upgrade the rest of that.
Do you think if they re-sign Pruitt that they're pretty much set at tight end, that they don't really have to do anything else? Or do you think that even though and I'm saying with Ferkser, whether they re-sign him or not, that's just a position that they don't have to worry about as long as they re-sign Pruitt?
If they re-sign Pruitt, it's really not a need. I do really wonder, because of their BPA approach, do they, in this tight end class, do they just sit there at 44
it's a very good class
and consider whoever's there? Like if Darnell Washington is there at 44, this is a guy who was built for Atlanta. Like basically an extra offensive lineman, just had one of the craziest tight end workouts you'll ever see at like 6'7", 265. The funniest thing watching Darnell Washington at the combine was like you watch all these tight ends pick up the sleds and just move him a couple feet and then put him down. Darnell Washington's just casually pushing this thing like 10 yards down the field, like he didn't even break a sweat. So it's like he's an offensive lineman playing tight end with a tight end athleticism. He's absurd. He's probably going to go late first, but if he's still there at 44, do the Falcons consider making Kyle Pitts more of a full-time outside receiver, getting Darnell Washington as the top tight end, having Michael Pruitt as your tight end too? Darnell Washington still is another threat in the receiving game, but given their just abundant use of multiple tight end sets, is Washington going to actually provide more value than a receiver because of how much he's going to be blocking? And that may elevate the offense a lot more than just adding another receiver. So that, I think, is an interesting topic to consider. I don't really think it's like a need per se. So I think if they get Pruitt back, they obviously got good blocking from Parker Hesse. Michael Pruitt was a good blocker and a very capable tight end too. But I think they can be flexible because of the way they construct this offense. They're not necessarily pigeonholed into needing just a wide receiver because Kyle Pitts can play wide receiver. So maybe you go to London and Pitts outside and you add Darnell Washington instead of a top wide receiver prospect and, just have this offensive skyscrapers and good and excellent run blockers, and they're just going to really, really, really be annoying to play against. Well, teams are going to hate them.
It gives you good chess pieces. So
yeah, and you get a tackle at 8 too. Get Paris Johnson, Darnell Washington in there, and then unfortunately you can't get Bijan also. No. That would be the icing on the cake if you somehow add Bijan to the mix.
But then again,
maybe they sign Jawan Taylor, then take Bijan at 8, then get Darnell Washington, then profit.
Yes. So. and that's what kind of moves us to the running back position to close out offense and that's the reason why I went with Robinson, because I'm like, here's a team that its primary focus is running the football. And yes, Allgeier had a nice little rookie season, nice player. Patterson, though, look, nice free agent the last couple of years. He's been better than people thought. But come on, I mean, eventually you got to find your star. You got to find your number one running back. And I just don't think Allgeier is that guy. I think he could be that guy in committee. But that number one guy, the guy that's going to be your all-pro on this team, which, again, I just think that you have to look at it. It's sort of like Andy Reid not caring about drafting receivers. It's just Arthur Smith, you would just think he's going to look at Robinson being available because he will be available. And that whether it's going to be just too tempting or not to just go, hey, man, look, I can get a guy that, if he's in love with them, of course, I can get a guy that could be here for the next 5 or 10 years and be a star. I'm going to go ahead and get him. So
yeah, I mean, say the Falcons do sign Jawan Taylor. Say the Falcons do sign a big time, defensive tackle, sign an edge rusher. They plug all of their holes in free agency with their just abundance of cap space, and they go into the draft basically being like, we're going to take the best player available, which is what they always do, and people are going to be shocked when this is exactly what happens. Why I would not be surprised at all if they take Bijan. They've shown us that they're perfectly willing to do this. They took a tight end at 4. I mean, I know people will probably be pissed, but Bijan Robinson is a top 3 player in this class, objectively speaking. He is a slot receiver, essentially. You could put him in the slot and he would be better than probably any other slot receiver the Falcons have. He's amazing. I mean, he is a special, absolute blue chip prospect. I will never be upset at taking a blue chip player ever. And I'd much rather take a premier star running back in the draft than pay them like the Giants are about to do with Saquon Barkley.
Yes.
Now, I think you could definitely argue that it doesn't really move the needle for them as much as some other players might. But this is a team that does legitimately run the ball more than anyone else.
That's right.
They had the number 1 most carries in the NFL. So if any team is going to benefit from a premier running back, it would be the Falcons.
That's correct.
You also have to take into account that, yes, the Falcons' run game was elite last year with rookie Tyler Algier, a 5th-round pick, carrying the load late, Cordarrelle Patterson carrying the load early, and Caleb Huntley pitching in. But Caleb Huntley tore his Achilles late in the season. He may not even play this year. You never know how those injuries go. They're devastating for everyone. I mean, Deontay Foreman took 3 years to come back from his Achilles. So Caleb Huntley, if he was healthy, I would say running back's not a problem. We don't know if he's even going to play. So that is their primary backup runner, other than Cordarrelle Patterson, who's not probably going to be even activated for week 1 at this point. Cordarrelle Patterson's going to be 32, and each of the last 2 years he has slowed down over the course of the season.
That's right.
It is what it is. Now, I would love to have Patterson. He's awesome. He adds so much dynamic presence to the game and does a lot for you as a kick returner, but I think his role needs to continue to be managed.
Yes.
He should not be getting more than 10 carries. He should probably be getting more looks in the passing game instead, and let him be the kick returner that he is. Let him go out there and return kicks, which is where he's Hall of Fame player. So now, in terms of running backs that you actually want carrying the load for you, you've got Tyler Algier, who, yes, broke Falcons rookie records, was awesome. Love Tyler Algier, no concerns. But you're 1 injury away from having to give the entire load to Cordarrelle Patterson and Avery Williams, who, look, He was a fine, like, change of pace, gadgety player, but he's taken like 8, 10 carries total, 20 carries. He's your punt returner, and he's really good punt returner. I think he led the NFL in punt return average, and maybe he can develop into a more consistent running back, but he's like 5'8", 190. I mean, this is not a guy that's taking a lot of carries. So really, you've got Tyler Algier and Cordarrelle Patterson, and that's it. So if one of those guys is injured, you're relying on Avery Williams to carry the ball. So, like, do they need a top running back? No, they need a running back somewhere, whether that's free agency. There's a million guys in free agency. I would love Alexander Madison to come here. Absolutely perfect fit, not going to be expensive. But, like, Bijan is the same thing. Like, you're better off having Bijan and Tyler Algier than just having Tyler Algier, especially if you're going to be running the ball 25 to 30 times a game. You know, we don't need Algier taking 20 carries. Like, no running back needs to get that workload, unless maybe you're Derrick Henry and you're just going to bludgeon guys to death. But Bijan is such a unique player. He's such a good receiver that, like, he doesn't even need to be in at running back. The Falcons used pistol all the time last year with 2 running backs. So why couldn't Bijan be back there with Tyler Algier? Why? And he's going to go out and run routes out of the backfield that'll rival most receivers. And what they do lack, I mean, as good as Cordarrelle Patterson is in the open field, he's not the 4.3 Cordarrelle Patterson anymore. He lacks that top end speed now. Still really savvy and really hard to tackle. But Bijan gives you that home run threat they just don't have that right now. And that would unlock a completely different element of the run game that they've been missing. And, you know, you can argue this till the cows come home or whatever, but the Falcons make the most sense of pretty much any team other than the Eagles in the top 10 for Bijan. And I would not be shocked at all if they do it. I mean, it makes a lot of sense for them. It fits how they like to do things. And like I think you could easily make the argument that he'll be the most talented player when they're picking. So it'll make a lot of people mad.
Why is that? Why are the Falcon, like, is there a specific position Falcon fans are zeroed in on?
There's a certain contingent that is obsessed with taking defensive line at 8, no matter what. Like, it has to be a defensive lineman or they don't know what they're doing. And I think people sort of miss the boat with that approach in that you're probably going to see between 2 to 3 edge rushers go before 8. Your Jalen Carter, as much as this whole rest thing is not great, probably still going to go before 8. Now, if Jalen Carter's there at 8, absolutely, like, assuming he's cleared or whatever, and not going to go to jail, like, yes, I would definitely take Jalen Carter at 8. But, you know, there's a certain contingent that is like, if it's not trenches, then we're going to be pissed.
Yeah, but I'm with you.
That for many years,
I don't really like a lot of the early talent at pass rusher once you get past Anderson and Wilson. It's
and there's
deep.
like a million guys on day 2.
Yes.
Yeah.
If you're not going to get Anderson or Wilson in the top 10, you might as well just wait until the second round or the third round to grab one of them.
Yeah, like Miles Murphy absolutely could be, you know, Myles Garrett level player in 3 years. You know, he has that athleticism, he has the size, but like he's nowhere near Myles Garrett right now, and probably is never going to even get near him. Lucas Van Ness is just a complete projection. I can't believe we're talking about him in the top 10.
No, I can't believe that either.
I can't believe it.
No.
It's just like, sure, he's fun. He's a crazy athlete. He's long. But, like, that doesn't mean you're going to be a good edge in the NFL. It doesn't translate that easily.
Not in the top 10. No.
Yeah. But because of how weak the top of this class is after Wilson and after Will Anderson, it's just people are trying to push edge high because they always do go high. And those 2 guys, like Myles Murphy and Lucas Van Ness, I think are more like 10 to 20 picks.
Yes.
And they should get drafted there because of the projection and the ceiling. But like top 10 picks, they're not blue chip guys. They're just not.
Yeah.
Like I can't get on board with taking those guys over Paris Johnson, Broderick Jones, Christian Gonzalez, you know, maybe even Bijan at that point. You know, I'd probably throw Devon Witherspoon in there as well at corner. So, like, those are blue chip players. I'm not going to take a projection over a blue chip guy. Like, that's not my style. I'm not going to reach to fill a need. And I don't think the Falcons will either. They've never, under Terry Fontenot, Arthur Smith, they have not reached for need. They have, in fact, gone against
that's the way to do it.
They took a safety in the second round their first year, and they took a off-ball linebacker in the second round last year, and Troy Anderson. So, like, they don't care about positional value. They're going to take the player they think is the best. So why? And I don't think anyone can make a convincing argument that they would not take Bijan. Like, this is the one team that you can't argue would not take Bijan. I mean, if it's like the Eagles, it's like, well, they're probably not taking a running back in the first round. They don't do that. But the Falcons, like, they took a tight end at 4.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't they take Bijan? I mean, there's no compelling argument that they wouldn't do it. So,
well, as we move over to defense, we got to start with the new defensive coordinator. So, does that change the scheme at all?
It's kind of unclear, right? You would think that something will change.
A little of this, a little of that, but you think still basically more of a 3-4 approach. That's going to be the scheme.
We have literally no idea, but
right.
My gut is saying that, but with the re-signing of Lorenzo Carter, that is the case. And I think everyone assumes that Ryan Nielsen's defense will be Dennis Allen's defense. I think that's probably an incorrect assumption. He did learn, obviously, under Dennis Allen, but I don't know why people just assume that he wants to run the exact same defense, why he might not want to tweak some things or do things his own way. So I do think that given the Falcons' personnel, Arnold Ebiketie, Lorenzo Carter, D'Angelo Malone, these are all 3-4 outside linebackers. Okay. Like, they need to at least play a 4-3 under where one of those guys can stand up. I do think it'll continue to be a hybrid front. They'll probably lean more towards that 3-4 base because of the personnel they have. And the Carter signing, I think, confirms that. Okay. But I also think they'll be open to having more 4-3-N type players because that's what Dennis Allen ran. I think that they'll try to get bigger as well on the interior. So I think it'll probably be a mix of fronts. But I do think the coverage and secondary is probably more likely to change the most significantly, more than the front. Even though Ryan Nielsen is more of a defensive front specialist, I do think they brought in a whole new secondary coach. I think that plus they got, what's his name from the Packers? Jerry Gray, to be the assistant head coach secondary specialist. And Ryan Nielsen coming in. I think that sort of signals that they weren't really happy with secondary coaching. Like, they want to move off of that. I think they're going to go to more of that Dennis Allen style, man-heavy, aggressive blitzing sort of play, as opposed to the very zone-heavy, interchangeable safety stuff that Pease played, which I'm a fan of. I do think that A.J. Terrell's a really good man coverage corner that needs to play more man. And I think that's probably the philosophy they'll shift more to. So probably more changes in the secondary than the front.
Okay. Now, you mentioned Ebiketie and Malone. So those two guys, being that they were taken last year, so they've got the year already under their belts, those are two guys that they're counting on to be part of their top edge rushers. So do you think, first of all, what do you think that they felt that got out of them and still believe in them? And do you think because of those two that they probably just need to add one more top edge rusher and then they should be okay for next season?
Yeah, with the re-signing of Carter, that definitely, like, now they've got Carter, Ebiketie, Malone, and 2021 fifth, sixth rounder. I can never remember. Ade Ogundeji in there. So they've got 4 edge guys already under contract. Now, obviously, they were the worst pass rush in the NFL last year, so you can't necessarily just run it back with those guys. Yeah. So somebody's probably getting pushed out. And it's probably going to be Ogundeji, who, as much as I like him, I liked his upside. I liked what he showed his rookie season. He was not good last year. Was poor against the run, provided nothing as a pass rusher. I think that he's probably the one on the outside looking in when the dust clears. I do think we're going to see one more free agent and probably another player drafted. But like you said, this is a deep edge class. That guy could be a day 2 edge. It could be a day 3 edge. I mean, I think a sneak peek for my mock coming out on Friday, like I took Tavius Robinson, who is a very high ceiling edge, in like the 5th round because there's just so many guys. They're going to fall. So I think it would be wise for them to sign somebody. I like Yannick Ngakoue a lot. And again, that sort of keeps them more in that 3-4 base. But there's a lot of guys out there that they could pursue. And then you get someone else into that rotation to help you out. And I think you're feeling a lot better. And maybe, if you sign Ngakoue, maybe the guy you draft is more of that 4-3, 5 tech, base end sort of guy. But I don't think they're that far off in terms of being ready to play. You know, they still need that like top tier edge, but I really don't think you're going to get that guy this year. Maybe if you land Ngakoue, you know, you're pretty happy with that. This is, you know, he's never had fewer than 8 sacks in his entire career. So like he's going to boost you, but is he really like a Myles Garrett edge one type of guy? Not really. But if you can't get an edge one, get 2 edge 2s. And I think Arnold Ebiketie, on that note, I think he played very well for a rookie. I think he probably deserved more snaps, especially than Ogundeji. He played about the same snaps as Ogundeji, which is ridiculous to me, and was like vastly more productive. And then we have D'Angelo Malone, who played very few snaps, but was always flashing when he was out there, and was also more productive than Ogundeji, even though he only played a couple hundred snaps. So I think you like those two guys. You know, I think Malone is probably more the designated pass rusher, and you're hoping Ebiketie is more of the full-time guy. You like Lorenzo Carter, who played 81% of the snaps at edge, which is just an absurdly high number for any defensive lineman, but he does a lot of stuff. And I think they're going to, you know, do the Dennis Allen thing and try to fudge it with blitzing and get that helped out. And one way to do that, and I'm sure we'll go there next, is the secondary, right? But, you know, one way to do that is to improve the secondary to get the coverage where it needs to be, sure. And then maybe you can afford to juice up your pass rush with a lot more blitzing. So,
well, before we do that, do they definitely need to upgrade the nose tackle position?
Yeah. I mean, Timmy Horn started to come on the UDFA. They had to cut their nose tackle, Anthony Richardson, because his weight got so out of control after like a few weeks of the season. And that really set them back against the run. But I mean, nose tackle is pretty wide open. I think it was Abdullah Anderson ended up playing a lot of nose late too, as more of the pass rushing nose. And he was pretty solid actually, but definitely like a pass rushing one tech, not a run stuffing one. So, yeah, I mean, I think this is a great draft to add a nose tackle. Keanu Benton is one that I draft a lot on day 2. You know, Siaki Ika didn't test well at the combine. That's going to hurt him. And he's also not a very good run defender. But the ceiling is crazy. So if he's going to fall later into day 2, then I would be more interested. But yeah, I mean, even guys like Mozzie Smith is there. I like Gerard Clark a lot from Coastal Carolina. He was really good at the Senior Bowl. He's like a day 3 guy that you can add for cheap. You can get nose tackles
later on. Yes,
late in the draft. Yep. So I think that's a spot to target there. But there's also a lot of really good ones in free agency. Like the interior free agent class is exceptional. Javon Hargrave is probably my top target. I would love that. Him and Grady Jarrett would be so nasty.
Are the Eagles definitely letting him go? You don't think they're going to bring him back?
That's the buzz. They did not tag him, and the buzz is that both of them are going to get absurd amounts in free agency. And like everyone was on Daron Payne, and I get that Daron Payne's younger, but like Javon Hargrave's way better. So I'd much rather pay $20 million to Javon Hargrave, who also has played nose tackle. He played nose tackle his entire time in Pittsburgh. So I love that signing. You know, Jordan Phillips from the Bills, maybe he breaks loose and he could be a good nose tackle signing.
Well, it's good to have money.
Onyemata from the Saints.
It's good to have cash. So somebody's going to get paid.
Onyemata. Yeah,
and for the Falcons.
Yeah. So they have lots of options on the interior. I would be surprised if they don't add at least one starter, and I think they could even add 2 on the interior. That's where they're going to spend a lot of money. Is probably on the interior.
Okay. And Troy Anderson, how was his rookie season? And will they bring back Evans, a middle linebacker?
Troy Anderson was exactly what I thought, right? Like very up and down, but the flashes were awesome. And you could see it starting to click a little bit for him late, but he just was out of position a lot. They had him playing a lot of zone, which is like, this is maybe like the highest upside man coverage linebacker in the NFL, especially on tight ends. And you're just having him drop in zone all the time. And he just wasn't comfortable doing it. I think if they play him more in man, which we might see a lot more of under Ryan Nielsen, he'll look a lot better. And I think he'll also learn to play zone coverage. He's only played linebacker for 2 seasons, period. So I'm not concerned. He definitely seems like he's a big part of their plans, and he should be. Okay. But there's probably still going to be some growing pains there, especially with the schematic change. But with Evans, if Pease was back, I would say that he's probably already re-signed at this point, if Pease was back. But with Pease gone, I don't think he comes back. I think Evans and Pease, they just seem to get each other. Like whenever Rashaan Evans was with Dean Pease, he was a great not great, but like he was a good starter.
Okay.
But whenever DPS was not with Rashaan Evans, he was a well below average starter.
Okay.
So I think that the Falcons are like, okay, we're moving on. He did play well for the Falcons last year on the whole, but I don't think he was a high-end starter, certainly, or someone that you really break the bank for. So we'll see if they like add a free agent there. There are some options. There's like maybe Tremaine Edmonds from the Bills. You've got, Levante David hitting free agency, even though he's a little bit older. Quincy Williams from the Jets. If the Jets don't bring him back, I think he was having a pretty good season. So that they have options. They could also they still have Michael Walker. He didn't really play as well as they hoped, but linebacker is also a spot where you can usually find starters on day 3. So they could go that route.
Middle linebackers, yeah. Mm-hmm. And linebackers in general. Okay. So
Jack Campbell, talk about his.
Oh,
combine.
yeah.
My goodness.
Sure. Absolutely. Yeah. Where's he projected to go right now, by the way?
I think he's going to be the first linebacker now. 6'4", 260 or whatever it was, and did almost a perfect 10 RAS. That I think he ends up going like early second at this point.
Well, that's an option. Let's go to that secondary now. First question is, are you still sold that that Terrell is a legitimate shutdown?
Yeah, I think so. Like before his injury, he was playing like cornerback 2 level, which is still fine, but it's like not what you were expecting. When he came back from injury, he was back to being AJ Terrell.
Okay.
So late in the season, after he came back from his injury, the last like 6 or 7 games, he looked like AJ Terrell 2021. So I'm very confident in him. And like again, that secondary was getting hung out to dry by the pass rush pretty much every single game, no pressure.
Yeah, that's true.
So it's like he's being put in really bad spots. They were playing so much deep, like so much zone where they were giving just giant cushions to everyone to try to limit the damage. And it's not a really good spot for any corner to really like excel in, but he still managed to do it. I mean, he has managed to be a very good corner on some really awful defenses, which is really hard to do, like to just be an elite corner in a bad defense. So I'm totally confident in Terrell. That being said, my sort of philosophy with the secondary as a whole, and I know we're going to get to safety too in a minute, so I'll save that for then. But like the Falcons secondary is much closer, I think, to being a legit unit than the front 7. I think you need a cornerback 2. You need to get your slot situation solidified, and you need one really good safety. And I think you're basically there. Whereas the front 7, it's like we need probably 2 more stars in the interior. We need at least 1 more edge guy, and we need another linebacker and all this stuff. You got a lot more parts to put in place there. The secondary, I think, and this is why like Christian Gonzalez at 8 is probably like I think if Christian Gonzalez is there at 8, that's the pick.
Okay.
Because Gonzalez is awesome, tested out, awesome, and Christian Gonzalez and AJ Terrell would have a case to be the top tandem in the NFL. Maybe not his rookie season, right? Because Gonzalez still has some growing to do, but pretty soon, those two, I think, would be able to match up with just about any wide receiver duo in the NFL. And then the slot, maybe you just bring back Oliver, who was fine.
Any reason they shouldn't?
Just price, but I don't think he's going to be asking for a lot.
Okay.
Considering that he was hurt again and didn't have a great season, he was fine as the slot guy, really good tackler. And if they want to blitz more, he's a really good blitzer too. So they do have some options there with D. Alford coming back. I thought he would probably deserve to play more in the slot. But yeah, that's another spot that they could look to upgrade. And that kind of bleeds into the safety discussion with, what about C.J. Gardner-Johnson, who's that versatile nickel safety player? Obviously has the connection with both Ryan Nielsen and Terry Fontenot. Jesse Bates has been linked with Atlanta to like a huge extent. Like he was dining out with Terrell and
really?
Hitz and everybody a couple days ago, maybe last week or whatever.
That would be nice.
And the Bengals are not going to re-sign him.
Yeah,
so,
no.
I mean, to me, like Jesse Bates has been at the top of my free agent wish list because I think you get in that Dennis Allen defense, they need that deep safety to be elite. When they had Marcus Williams, that was when they were playing their best defense. Even Tyrann Mathieu hasn't been able to replicate that when they had that elite, rangy ball hawk back there. And I think Jesse Bates would give Atlanta that elite safety, let you bring Richie Grant more into the box where I think his aggressiveness is a lot better. And he doesn't have to, cover as much ground and make as many early decisions. And I think, with Richie Grant and Jesse Bates, that safety group is going to look a lot better. And you still have Jalen Hawkins as your depth guy, who is like a solid starter.
Yep.
So I think you add Jesse Bates in there, that's great. You add an early corner.
And re-sign Oliver.
And re-sign Oliver, and you're pretty much set. And I think you're looking at a legit secondary.
Sure.
And then now the defensive front can afford to take more aggressive risks. They can afford to rush more guys. They can afford to send blitzes a lot more frequently because you can trust the coverage on the back end. You have that eraser and Jesse Bates to really prevent the deep shots, and maybe 2 elite corners on the outside eventually that are going to be able to smother teams' top threats. Really the slot is the one spot that maybe still needs help, but slot guys, I've heard they really like Kytrell Clark from Louisville. Maybe they double dip. They get Gonzalez early, and then they get Kytrell Clark, on day 3. Anything could happen there. But I do think the secondary is much closer to being done. And if they are able to do that, that's going to help the whole defense just be average. Like, if you can just get that secondary to a good level, and you can get your pass rush out of embarrassing levels, they weren't that far off from being an average defense. I mean, especially late in the season, they weren't exactly playing this murderer's row of offenses, but they held, I think, every opponent in the last 4 or 5 games under 20 points or something close to that. I think it was one game they allowed more than 20 points. And that's what you should do against bad offenses, even if you're not a great defense. So obviously it's a new system and all this stuff is happening, but despite spending literally the least amount of money on their defense of any team by far, they were like the 22nd defense. So I think they're probably closer than people think to being a serviceable defense. No one's saying they're going to turn into this great defense overnight, but if they could just get to average with this awesome running game and hopefully Desmond Ridder taking a step forward, now you're starting to see in what's really a weak NFC, that could be a playoff team. I mean, that's especially in the NFC South, where Derek Carr's with the Saints now. I do think that was a good signing for them, but they're going to bleed so much talent every year because of this situation. I can't believe the Saints just did it again. They were like, you know what? We could just take this year and fix our cap. And they were like, no, actually, let's double down again. And they've been doubling down every year for 5 years.
And that's going to come back to haunt them sooner or later. Yes.
But it came back to haunt them last year. That depth was
on the field. Yes.
Yeah. And they're just like, you know what? Let's do that again. So, interesting time.
It's the way they want to go. But couple more things. First of all, do they just bring Pinion back?
Yeah, I think so. I would definitely bring Pinion back. He had a very, very good year.
Okay.
Same age as Younghoe Koo, so you can have that duo locked up together for a while. Bring back, the Matt Bryant, Matt Bosher days with that consistent duo.
Okay.
The Falcons special teams was really good. I think it was one of the best units in the NFL. The punt returning with Avery Williams, he had the highest punt return average. Their coverage units were great. Obviously, Younghoe Koo is great. The punting was really good. I don't think you mess with that. And that's also why I'd probably re-sign guys like Daryl Hodge at wide receiver, who is a core special teamer and a solid depth receiver as well.
Okay.
Mike Ford at corner, wasn't really a great corner, but a key special teamer, not expensive. And he can play inside and outside, so he does give you that depth. So I think they've made a clear commitment to having special teams specialists, funny to say that, on their roster all over the place. Keith Smith, the fullback, is a great special teamer as well. So, they've had some special teams linebackers. Troy Anderson was an amazing special teamer last year. I remember him shutting down a potential kickoff return touchdown.
Who was that?
Him just completely Troy Anderson.
Okay.
He comes flying from out of frame to tackle somebody who's going to score a kick return touchdown because he runs a 4.4 it's absurd. So they've made a real commitment to making special teams really good. I think they will continue to do that now that they have money.
Okay.
And
then the last question is regarding the money. So now that we've gone through it all, give me your best guess. You've already given me one, I believe, and that's Bates. So give me your best guess of the top free agents that they're going to end up bringing in here. And Bates, we'll start with Bates. Is he the number one guy that you think? If you had to gamble and say which top free agent the team is going to sign, Bates would be at the top of the list?
I mean, I don't know. It's part of me is like, oh, well, there's so much buzz around it. That means it's definitely not going to happen. But like, I do think like, yes, it seems like that's the most likely one. I think it makes sense on a lot of levels. He seems to have a relationship. Like he has the same agent, I think, as Kyle Pitts and
helps.
AJ Terrell and all of these guys.
Yes.
And like, this is an ascending team, and they're probably going to offer him a significant contract because they can. And teams around the NFL, a lot of teams sort of devalue safety. I think that's foolish. I think it's one of the more underrated positions. So I'm comfortable paying Bates 18 to 20 per. He's only 26.
Yes.
I can't believe that.
He's in the prime of his career.
Yes. If you're going to pay someone big money, they better be 26 or whatever. You give him a 5-year deal, he'll be 31 when it ends, and you can give him another deal. Yep. So I'm definitely a fan of that approach. And then probably Javon Hargrave is my number 2.
And do you think that's realistic? The Falcons, do you think they would like him to be here?
I think so.
Okay.
Now that's a lot of money, right? If you pay Bates 20 and you pay Javon Hargrave 20, that's probably most of your cap space if you front load the deals, which they can do because they have so much money. Now, if they get creative with the structure and try to push money forward, which they could also decide to do, then you could sign as many players as you want.
Sure.
You could sign them, you could sign Darius Slayton, you could sign a bunch of guys. So I don't know what approach they're going to take. I don't know if they're going to continue to do this very responsible spending and front load a lot of deals, and try to keep their cap as healthy as possible going forward. And there's reasons to do that too. Like maybe you want to wade into the quarterback market in a future year, so you need to make sure you have enough cap to throw at that guy. But at the same time, we're probably going to see the cap explode next year because of the new Sunday ticket deal, the new TV deals, and all that stuff continuing to come in. So you could probably gamble a little bit that like we're going to probably get a 15 to 20 million boost again next year, and they're currently paying a giant salary to Jake Matthews on purpose. After this year, his salary is basically very minimal. I think it goes down to like 18 per or lower, and it's not much of it's guaranteed. So they've set themselves up for financial health going forward. So I think they can afford now to give out these long-term deals and spread the money around if they want. And especially if they don't pay McGarry or another tackle. Because I was sort of expecting them to pay McGarry like $17 million per year. So if they don't pay him that, then they've got a lot to play around with. They do have to extend Chris Lindstrom. I don't think he's going to play on the fifth-year option. So Lindstrom's probably going to get the bag. But again, because of their health, they can give him either a front-loaded contract and make it more manageable, or they can backload it more, which they might want to do because, again, he's 26. So you're not really concerned about having big cap hits later on because you could just extend him again.
Same thing with Terrell, right? They're going to extend him soon?
Yeah, I think it'll be next year, right? Because they have to pick up his fifth-year option this year, and they'll probably just extend him in that fifth-year option season. But, I mean, I wouldn't be shocked if they wanted to extend him too, given how much money they have this year. So we'll see. But this is like it's really interesting because the Falcons and the Saints, right? Big rivals, but also polar opposites in terms of team building. The Saints just spent giant money on a veteran quarterback. The Falcons are looking like they're going to start Desmond Ridder. The Saints are probably going to have to max out every restructure they can and push even more money into next year to pay for their roster. And the Falcons did the opposite. They took on $83 million in dead cap last year to clear the books completely, and now they've got just all this money to play around with for the next, several years. And it's like, this is the same GM tree. Mickey Loomis, Terry Fontenot, completely polar opposite team building strategies.
Good point. Yeah.
And it's just really interesting. And I guess we can't say which one's better right now. I think the Saints and the Falcons finished basically the same record. The Saints did beat the Falcons last year, so I mean, there's that.
If you ain't winning playoff games and competing for a Super Bowl, the Falcons' way is better.
That's what it seems like to me. But I am curious to see how that goes. And there's a lot left to be written about this offseason. Maybe we get to the end of it and say, like, oh, the Falcons maxed out their cap and we're right back in the same place. Know. But at that point, you would think that the roster would be drastically better. True. So you're probably not too upset. But it's going to be an exciting one. The first exciting offseason in multiple years for Atlanta now that they finally have some money to throw around.
We've talked about it. and it's here.
The patience has paid off,
Yes.
I hope.
And so Bates and Hargrave, that's going to be the two. Those are the two big.
That would be the chef's kiss.
Okay,
Yeah.
excellent.
I will accept David Onyemata and Jordan Phillips instead of Javon Hargrave. However, I'll accept that as a second
just
choice.
in case. All right, and
you get the
Taylor
two
too is a
guys.
possibility.
Yeah, Jawan Taylor.
Okay.
Yeah, let's go.
Yeah.
Let's just do all of those guys. I'll take everything on the menu.
Yeah, right. It's not your money. All right, so excellent. Thanks a lot. Appreciate it as always, Kevin. This is going to be very helpful, and we're going to talk after the draft. So that'll give us an opportunity to see how the offseason went for Atlanta, because it goes pretty quickly. Draft is next month, so within the next 2 months, we'll pretty much have the entire offseason behind us. So we'll find out the direction of the Falcons, and this is a big one. Yeah, like we've been talking about, this is the big one with all the money. And by the way, the draft capital. So first round, and what else?
So they have a first, a second, a third, 2 fourths. The second one's from the Julio Jones trade.
Okay.
Thanks, Titans. And they have a fifth from the Calvin Ridley trade that did improve from a sixth to a fifth because he was reinstated a couple days ago. And then they have 2 sevenths. So no sixth rounders, but they do have 2 sevenths.
So they got the 2 fourths. So that's the top kind of.
Yeah. Okay. 2 fourths, 2 sevenths, and a fifth now. So I think they have 8 picks, 7 picks.
Do they have any future picks?
At this point, I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't think they have any extra picks going forward.
All right. So again, your coverage of the Falcons, though, is you can find it on YouTube. So you can go. I'll provide a link in this interview, and you can also scroll down to the bottom of our homepage, and you'll see that we have a direct link to the Falcoholic YouTube page. So that makes it easy. Otherwise, you had a great combine, so good to have you back. Was that the first time you went?
I didn't actually go. I just watched a lot.
Okay.
But yeah, I did find out it's only about an 8-hour drive from New York, which because I live in upstate. So that actually is tempting me to go.
There you go.
Next year, very much so.
Yes.
But it's definitely something I'm gonna hit going forward. But definitely a fun one to watch. This is one of the most athletic combines in recent history. So
it keeps getting that way. But yeah,
it does. Last year was like that too. So
yeah, well, they better because the talent pool is down a little bit. So
right.
All right. Again, excellent. Thanks, Kevin. We'll talk to you again real soon. No later than right after the draft. So enjoy yourself. Appreciate it.
Yes, absolutely. You as well. Thanks.